Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Oh, this is already a record number for our webinar this summer. We're going to wait a couple more seconds for people to file in. Love to see so many people zooming in. We're over 80 people in attendance right now. That's amazing. So as the last few people come in, I just want to thank our webinar series sponsors, IDEX, Maine Health, and Tyler Technologies. We love their support. We couldn't do without them. Also want to pitch that we have a few more events coming up. We have a trip to the Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens in Booth Bay and kayaking at the sea and at the Nonantum Resort, two events that are coming up the next few weeks. So be sure to check those out. All right. If you could please put in the chat, where you're interning, maybe even your working location. We'd love to see that. We'd love to see all the different people zooming in from around the state and sometimes even out of state. So feel free to put that into the chat. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and I'm just going to have all of our panelists quickly just introduce themselves. We are really excited for everyone to be here. We have a great panel lined up for you about negotiating offers, making decisions, something that as interns, I'm sure you're all thinking about. So I'm going to just have the panelists briefly just say their name and where they're working at, just a brief kind of statement. And then we'll have Corian start this and also start off the show. So I'll have you go first.
Helps if I unmute. I'm Corian Quint. I am an employee benefits specialist. I work with New England Financial Services, and I own my own agency, Benefits and Beyond.
Matt?
Hey everyone, Matt Rothman. I oversee early talent development at Hannaford Supermarkets, and I manage our internship programs, co-op program, and leadership development program. Happy to be here.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessica. I am a senior talent acquisition specialist at Baker Newman Noyes, so I oversee our early talent recruiting and onboarding program.
All right. Hi, everyone. I am Carol Pacheco, the People Operations Director at Baker Newman Noyes, and I oversee all of the HR operations side of the work there.
And you may know Juliet, but I'll have Juliet introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Juliet. I'm the Maine Career Catalyst Communications and Event Planning intern.
Awesome. So we have a full lineup for you today. Feel free to drop in your questions throughout the whole thing, but we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. I'm going to turn it over to Corian to start. All right, take it away.
All right, there we go. Sorry, Corian Quint. I wasn't sure we were doing an introduction, so I did have an introductory slide. Corian Quint, Certified Employee Benefits Specialist, which is a designation I got through the International Foundation of Employee Benefits Specialists and the Wharton School of Pennsylvania. I've been doing employee benefits since '98. As I said, I am an account executive of New England Financial, as well as my own agency, Benefits and Beyond, to supplement. I live in Wells with my husband, son, daughter, her boyfriend, and 6 dogs. More, ask me if you want to know any more about that. I aim to enrich, protect, and empower. And so today we are hoping to enrich you with some resources to help you out on your journey. So we're going to go really quickly, just an introduction to insurance benefits, understanding the basics. We're going to focus a little bit on health insurance. We're going to talk about some other offerings that are there, some questions to ask, as well as some final tips and takeaways. So, negotiating a job offer can feel very daunting, whether it's the salary discussions or understanding benefit packages. It's really easy to feel overwhelmed, especially when it comes to insurance. And today I want to help you kind of demystify the process and equip you with the knowledge and the confidence to navigate these negotiations. So sometimes benefits can feel kind of like learning another language, and it's okay. It is kind of a different language. So asking questions is really important, but I'm hoping to give you a high level overview of what's out there. And if you need any help or assistance, I'm happy to help in the future. So insurance is probably one of the most crucial aspects of your employee benefit package. It's going to provide you with a safety net that you need to protect your health, finances, and your future. By understanding some basic insurance terminology and benefits, you can put yourself in the driver's seat of your career. So let's dive into the basics of insurance. At its core, insurance is a financial product that provides protection against specific risks. In the context of employment, this typically includes things like health insurance, dental, vision, life, and disability insurance. So I thought I'd spend some time familiarizing us with some common insurance terms, such as premiums. You hear about people talk about premiums. This is the amount that you pay for your insurance coverage. Most often you'll find it deducted from your paycheck. You may have heard the term deductible. That's the amount that you need to pay first before the insurance kicks in. And then you may have heard of co-payments. This is a fixed amount that you pay for certain services like doctor's visits or prescriptions. There's also co-insurance, which is typically after you meet your deductible. A lot of plans have co-insurance where you and the insurance company are sharing in the costs. So there's like you would pay 20, 30, 40%, and the insurance company would pay the other portion. There's also coverage limits, maximum amounts that you will pay for covered services. There are different networks that you can get when you've got health insurance plans, and these networks are intended to help manage costs. So, you've got your health maintenance organizations, or HMOs. People may have heard of that. That's going to require you to have a primary care physician, and that primary care physician acts kind of like a gatekeeper. So they're the ones that would issue a referral. If they can't handle it at the primary care level, then they would connect you with a specialist through a referral. Another structure would be a PPO, a preferred provider organization. This is a type of health plan that offers a little more flexibility. You don't need to name a primary care doctor. You just need to make sure that whoever you see participates in the network to make sure that the money that you're spending is limited. You can go outside the network, but you have more money that you could pay for that. Another type of network that we're seeing coming out a lot more is exclusive provider organizations. So that's EPO. It's similar to PPOs, but with stricter rules about using in-network providers. You might also see plans that are considered high deductible health plans. These are typically paired with a health savings account. They do require a little bit higher out of pocket before coverage kicks in. But what we're finding, at least in Maine, is the out of pocket maximums tend to be a little bit lower on those plans. So these are some terms that you might hear kicking around. I wanted to give you kind of a basic overview of what that meant. So in addition to health insurance, you're going to find that a lot of companies offer a lot of other types of insurance. So dental and vision. So this is coverage for your dental exams or vision exams, dental cleanings, glasses, things like that. Life insurance. I think life insurance is probably the most recognizable. So if you pass away prematurely, your beneficiaries would receive money. Others, disability insurance. Disability insurance is arguably one of the most important insurances that you get because it protects your ability to bring home a paycheck if you can't work due to an injury or an illness. Then we've got a variety of other things worksite plans is what they're called. So you might see things like an accident plan, which pays you directly if you have accidental injuries. These are supplemental plans. You definitely want to make sure you've got your health insurance and other primary coverages in place before looking at those supplemental ones. But know that they're there and they're tools and they can help. You might come across critical illness insurance. That's going to pay you money directly if you have things like a heart attack, stroke, organ failure. Some of these critical illness plans also cover cancer. Sometimes there's standalone cancer plans. Hospital indemnity would pay you if you needed to be admitted to the hospital. And then you decide what you do with that money, whether or not maybe you've already paid your deductible. And so that money belongs to you. You get to use it however you want. Prepaid legal services is another benefit that I see from time to time, which helps equip you with resources to ask legal questions, have documents reviewed, and so on and so forth. And another one that I think is really important is employee assistance programs. So EAP is what that stands for. So if the company that you're looking at has an employee assistance program, it's good to know what they offer. Sometimes they'll offer a series of mental health visits that don't have to go against your health insurance. Sometimes they equip you with resources on how to solve problems like my dad is starting to get dementia. I need to put him in a daycare. Where do I go? EAPs are programs that can help you facilitate those. Another type of employee benefit to keep in mind would be retirement plans. There's lots of different retirement plans. I'm sure you've probably heard of 401ks, but there's also simple IRAs, SEPs, and et cetera. These are all kind of a tax shelter, meaning that you don't pay taxes on the money that's contributed to these accounts. But when you take money out, that's when you would pay your taxes on it. And the theory behind it is that when you hit retirement, you're probably going to be in a lower tax bracket. It's not always necessarily the case. So then they came around with Roth. That could be Roth 401k, Roth IRAs. These are programs that will allow you to use after-tax money to save for retirement, and then the money in those grows, and it's not taxable. So those are some things that you want to see and ask questions about. First of all, is there something that they're offering, and what does that look like? So I know I'm going really fast, but I touched upon a few of these things. The first step is begin asking yourself, what are your needs? You want to assess what's going on in your life right now and in the future. Consider your lifestyle, any long-term implications and potential risks. So I know Carol's going to touch upon comparing options in the next presentation, so I won't go into that too much. But think about, what do you anticipate in your life, major life events? Are you planning on entering the next Tough Mudder? Are you buying a home? Are you getting married? Are you children in your future? All of these are considerations when you're choosing your health plan and the other benefits that you're going to consider. And in negotiations, don't be afraid to ask questions. It's very important that you understand what's available to you. So if you need to, clarify those coverage details. What services are covered? Are any exclusions or limitations included? Are they flexible? Sometimes employers will offer more than one health plan, and you need to pick which one works best for you. Is there any option to customize coverage? What portion of premiums would be payable by the employer? Or is the employer contributing? Those are all very important questions to ask. So finally, some tips for effective communication during negotiations. Be clear and concise. Be sure to articulate your needs and concerns clearly and directly. Seek clarification. Don't hesitate to ask for explanations. There are some complex terms and jargon that gets thrown around. And use this as approach these negotiations as a collaborative process that will allow you to build rapport with your employer or HR representative. It's an opportunity to build a positive relationship as you explore these things. So in conclusion, understanding insurance and benefits is essential for navigating job offers and successfully. So by familiarizing yourself with some of this terminology, evaluating your coverage options, and asking the right questions, you can make informed decisions that set you up for success in your career. So I want to thank you for allowing me to spend a few minutes in this presentation. And remember that you have the power to drive your career forward with confidence. And you've got a bunch of resources available. So feel free to use all of us for what we have to offer. So thank you very much. How did I do in keeping with my 10 minutes, John?
Well, there's so much to go over. That's an insane amount of information that you just covered, but that was great. And we already have some questions popping in. I think what we'll do is we'll throw it over to Carol, but please keep the questions coming because I think that you all will have a lot of questions, but thank you so much.
All right. So, Corianne, thank you for all the insurance terminology. I think that's a great segue into this next part of where I will show folks what the actual health benefit packages look like on paper and seeing that terminology in play. So before I start, I'd love to talk through a little bit and shed a little bit of information on how to navigate some of these decisions before I show you our 2 different health benefit offerings that we do at BNN and what to expect when it comes to the employers versus employee costs. But before we start, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. So one is typically when you are starting a benefit eligible position, you have about 30 days from your hire date to choose a benefit. So it's not something that you have to do within the first couple of days. Like take some time, talk to folks, really make that decision in the best, most educated way possible. When you're choosing a plan, you should consider your own health needs, what you're willing to pay out of pocket, as well as weighing the priorities or importance when it comes to those health needs. It can definitely be a tough decision. Some companies may offer outside resources that will help you navigate those decisions. Otherwise, talking to family and friends, they might have a bit more insight as they may already be in the workforce and have shed some light around that. What is nice though is that even though you have to make a decision probably within the first 30 days of employment, there are opportunities later on to make changes. So for example, most companies do what is called open enrollment, where each year employees are able to go through their benefits and decide whether they're going to keep the benefits that they've already chosen or decide to change their benefits. So this happens yearly, and it all depends on the cycle and stuff. Most companies do it with an effective date of January 1st. So open enrollment might be in the fall time. You decide what you want to do as changes, and then it's effective that following January. So you will have opportunities to make some changes later on, even after that first period during your new hire stage. And then there's also other moments, which Corianne, you mentioned a couple of times in terms of like keeping in mind whether you are having any type of life events. So for example, are you getting married or are you having a child? Those are also other opportunities throughout the year that you may make other benefit elections because of those life events. So there are a few different options, even after your new hire stage, to make changes to your benefits. So what you choose now may change in the future, and that's okay. You do have other opportunities. But now let's get into the actual benefit plans and what they will look like within your future employers. So let me share my screen on that. Second. Okay. Let me know if you're seeing the health benefits screen. John, do we know if we're showing the screen with the medical?
Yep, we can see it, Carol.
You can see it? Okay, perfect. So on the screen, I have our snapshot of what comes out of our benefits package, our benefits guide that we provide new hires. We offer 2 different benefit plans at BNN through Harvard Pilgrim. And the first one you're seeing on the screen is the point of service plan, or POS plan. And the second one we have that I'll show you in just a second is our high deductible plan, which is also a PPO for us. So let's start off with the POS plan. And some things to highlight through this plan is for these POS plans, as Corianne mentioned, like you would have to select a primary care physician. This will also require selecting, needing to get referrals when you are looking to for any type of visits that are outside of your basic needs. So for example, are you seeing a specialist? That would probably require referral in this type of plan. So then aside from that, you may want to consider is that time worth it for you in terms of having to seek referrals every time you have to visit a specialist? Are you constantly visiting doctors for one reason or another? That may be something to keep in mind as you're making decisions around which benefit plan to choose. And then the other part around this is around just even the cost that comes out of pocket. So typically an employee will be paying out of pocket through their pay periods a certain amount. This plan, for example, for an individual employee is about $73. It's a little bit high on that end. However, there are some benefits to this plan. And sorry, I'm in the Boston office, so the lights goes out every so often. One of the benefits is around the deductible amount. So within this plan, deductible is about $3,500. That is what technically the employee is responsible for. However, BNN offers what we call an HRA, which means that the first $1,000 of the deductible is for the employee to pay, and then the rest, the other $2,500, the employer BNN pays for. So in reality, your deductible isn't actually $3,500; it's actually $1,000. So when you're looking at the amount that you're paying, out of pocket each pay period, you also have to consider what are the benefits that you're actually getting out of this plan. And what you'll also see on this screen is a lot of the terminology that Korean covers. So we talked about deductible, the out-of-pocket max, so what you would essentially be responsible for at the maximum amount before the insurance kicks in. We have co-insurance in here, and then some of the co-pays you'll see throughout as well. So then if we move on to our next plan, we have here the high deductible health plan, which is our PPO. And in this one, it's a high deductible, meaning that the cost is definitely going up in terms of the deductible. So we went from a deductible of $3,500, where the employee in the previous plan only was responsible for the first $1,000, to now being responsible for $5,000 of the deductible. However, if we go down, the per pay period amount drastically decreases. So now an employee might be paying just $23 out of their pockets on a given pay period. So again, what are you willing to pay out of pocket upfront versus if you do need to utilize the services, or if you are going to be utilizing it often or not on that end. So with this plan, you wouldn't need a primary care physician. It's always a good thing to have, but this isn't one of those plans where you are required to have one. There's also more flexibility. So as long as you're doing within the network, you wouldn't need referrals to see specialists. So really, there are additional features that may make this benefit plan more favorable than the other one. And then the other added piece to this is that you would be able to tie this with the HSA offering, so the health savings account, which is a pre-tax benefit where you're able to save some money so that you can use it towards these type of deductibles and costs that you might have throughout the period of time that you're utilizing this benefit. So as I go to the last page, actually this one wouldn't have it. So it really would have been a side-by-side comparison of the two benefit plans. In general, as you're looking and deciding between the two plans, which is what typically happens in most companies that offer you more than one option, you really have to consider how often are you going to the doctor? Are you seeing folks regularly? Are you seeing specialists? Will you need referrals? Will you hit your deductible sooner rather than later? How much are you willing to pay out of pocket? And then the last piece of advice I will give, especially for this group, as a lot of you are, going into internships and may not be at the age where you are required to get a health plan on your own. Many of you guys can stay on your parents' insurance until the age of 26. So I encourage that as much as possible, because this means that a lot of these decisions can be delayed until a later point in life, as long as it's something that your parents are willing to do. I can tell you from my own personal experience, when my parents found out I was able to get off their plan, they kicked me out right away. But if you do have parents that are open to having you stay on their plans, that may be something that you can consider, and it gives you a little bit more time to make these type of decisions as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt and Jess.
Well, Corian, Carol, thank you so much. I kind of want to just to bring up a few questions about before we jump into more of the negotiation side, but some of the questions have been really great. We encourage you to keep on using that Q&A function, but and we can answer your questions in that function as well. But just a couple questions, like what if a company, offers no insurance? And this might be a question for the whole panel or just our first two speakers, but when are you considering a company that offers no insurance versus a company that does? How do you make that decision?
I actually just responded to somebody's inquiry, so that's not uncommon. There's no legal requirement for companies under 50 employees to offer insurance. A lot of them still do because they want to remain competitive, but it's not uncommon if you have a small company that you're working with. So you just need to make sure that the compensation is enough to have you insure yourself privately. If insurance is important to you, make sure that the compensation includes enough that you can actually go out and purchase your own.
And that may be actually an opportunity there where the whole thing about waiting until you're 26 and then getting on someone's insurance, getting on your own insurance, like that's an opportunity there. Like, can you stay on your parents' insurance for a little bit longer? And this job may be the job that is right for you at this moment. That may be an option there. The other part is like, look at it from more of a total rewards package. Like, are you being offered other aspects that are more important to you in terms of like, flexibility in the workplace, like the compensation itself, like, are there bonuses? Like, are all of this creating a total rewards that is more beneficial, and then you have other outside options in terms of the health insurance, then that may still be the right job for you or the right opportunity for you.
Actually, Carol, I'm glad you brought that up. There's a thing called a total compensation statement that some employers will give you that will actually add up the value of the benefits that they're offering you. So even though you're only receiving a salary of X, when you include all the benefits that they're offering, you might be getting a much bigger compensation package than you originally thought. So that's something that you might want to ask for if it's available.
I think that's a great segue to kind of bring in Matt and Jessica to talk about, from the employer's perspective, how we negotiate, how we make decisions. And we can loop back. If anyone has any kind of more insurance specific questions, pop them into the chat and we'll go back later. But I think that total compensation statement, the total rewards, that is offered, I think that's a great segue. So I'm going to bring in Matt and Jess here. So Matt's hiding still. So there he is. So can you two just briefly kind of explain your role in more detail, both in the HR field here?
Jess, can you go first?
Sure, I can start. So in talent acquisition at Baker Newman Noyes, I'm responsible from the beginning to end of what would be your interviewing process. So the second you submit a resume, that goes to me. I screen resumes, do the phone screenings, and then I help coordinate with hiring managers to get feedback for you, move forward through interviews. And then once we get through offer stage, I also act as the kind of intermediary between what may be a negotiation and kind of working between candidate and hiring manager to really figure out the best possible solution and how we can kind of get you on board and happy here.
And I work at Hannaford Supermarkets. Similarly to Jess, I deal with a lot of the applications inbound, but specifically for interns, some of those early career professionals. I oversee that soup to nuts, making the offers and really trying to work with those folks to make sure what they're applying for actually is something that they want to pursue and grow. Because as you know, you don't know what you don't know, so you apply for things without sometimes knowing what they're about.
So I kind of want to just have a little discussion about what you as, hiring managers, hiring directors, like to see, what gets your interest, what what are you looking for, and what are you not necessarily looking for? Very broad level here.
Yeah, so in terms of, I get candidates in through a couple different ways, as I'm sure Matt does as well. So ideally, either meeting students on campus in that kind of face-to-face experience. I'm really looking for someone who kind of comes in, has that confidence, good eye contact, able to talk to their experience, talk to their interest, have a resume on hand, and have those professional qualities. Similarly, when I'm screening resumes, it's just an introduction to kind of get you in the door to an interview. I'm looking for good organization on the resume. I always say to students when I'm doing a resume review, the easier you can make it for recruiters to read your resume and to pick out exactly what they want to see, whether that be your education, your graduation date, your major, your last job experience, your responsibilities, the more likely you are to get through to the interview stage, because they're able to quickly identify exactly what they need to know and exactly what makes them know that you are a potential fit for the role.
So on the Hannaford side, similarly, if I see you in person, we are a people business. If you don't walk up with a smile, engage me, how are you going to engage customers and or teams that you could lead in our corporate office and in various areas? So that initial approachability and being comfortable with yourself is probably the first thing I look for when I meet someone in person. Beyond that, when I look at resumes, again, simplicity is key. And it also needs to be something that makes me want to learn more about you. I don't want a novel in a resume that I have no questions. I want a few things that make me wonder. I need to talk to you because I want to learn more about that thing that you did or find out how you did it. I guess totally just blanked on my train of thought there. There was another piece about, fun fact, I actually was doing an interview resume class with my intern cohort last week, and we talked about cover letters. I looked back, out of the 11 interns we hired this summer, all of those 11 had submitted cover letters. So I'm not saying that we require it, but it's definitely telling that out of 300 candidates, the 11 that we actually hired all submitted cover letters.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So some great tips on what makes you kind of stand out from the pack, right? From when you're only hiring, a dozen or so out of hundreds of applicants, right? Could be tough. Let's fast forward to the salary negotiate. I know there's a lot between when you apply to now you're negotiating for your offer, but I do want to spend some time on that. So what's reasonable? What's not reasonable? We'll start there. Like when you're making an offer, a company wants to hire you, right? You want that person, but we all know that there is some wiggle room. So what is acceptable and or maybe even an anecdote of what is totally not acceptable? I'll have Jessica go first.
Okay. Yeah, I would say, especially when you're coming in as a college student, I think it gets a little bit different, obviously, when you're 15 years into your career. I think coming into as a college student I always recommend, regardless of the amount you're trying to negotiate for, lead with gratitude and excitement. I think that that's hugely important, and that really frames what you're asking for, whether it be $5,000 or $10,000. The tone, I think, makes a lot bigger of a difference than what you're asking for. Although I do think, reasonable would be $5,000, $7,000, negotiating on benefits, PTO. I think you get to the unreasonable where you have, internship experience, you're just graduating when you get to that $10,000+, unless the range is really lowballing you. I think it's important for you to do your research. There's plenty of sites out there, salary.com, Glassdoor talks salaries. Take all salaries online with a grain of salt, but you can find some pretty good, employee-led data in terms of what the market rates are in your area. and lead with that foot forward. Lead with the research. I always recommend don't go into salary negotiations with emotions or feelings of any sort. Lead with, this is what I've noticed in the market. This is what I've gotten offered at another organization. Is there any way we can meet closer to that?
I 100% agree. Ultimately, yes, they're offering you a job, but at the same time, it's how much do you want that job versus how much do they want you? And so, especially for your first job, you can totally make that mistake of saying, oh, I got an offer. It's amazing. I don't question it. And you jump in 2 feet first. And then when you get settled, you look around and you realize, wow, everyone else around me might be making a little bit more than me. So Glassdoor, Glassdoor, Glassdoor. Understand what that company pays as well as competitors, but don't just look at a competitor and assume they're apples and oranges. I'm in the supermarket business. There are other supermarkets that are true competitors, and there's some that don't, and they pay vastly different wages, right? Equally so, you get into some markets, you might be doing accounting for a mom and pop's, like couple people's taxes versus doing it for an entire organization. There's different levels that will warrant different levels of compensation. So really understanding what you're applying for, what the true wage band or salary that competency commands, and then be humble about it, right? At the end of the day, if you're okay with walking away from that job, you can be a little aggressive, but be okay with walking away and not having a job. If you really want the job, go in and say, hey, it can't hurt to ask. And in most cases, it can't hurt to ask. We're not going to say no if you ask. We might just say, hey, there is no wiggle room. Or oftentimes it's like, well, and again, depending on the role, depending on the company, there might be a little bit of room for negotiation, but you have to ask that question. But you have to ask it in that right way, like you just said.
Corian, were you gonna share something? No, you're muted.
No, sorry, I was looking at the questions and answers.
Okay. Well, I wanted to kind of zero in on and someone from the chat posted this too, but how do you make that ask? I think it's easy to say yeah, make that ask, but is there certain language you would even prefer to see, or and then as we know, someone in the chat kind of asked, how do different people groups make that ask? Do you see a difference between that? Kind of to follow it up, big picture, how does a company's culture influence the culture of negotiating? How can an intern assess that? Here's a company that it's okay if I make this ask. Here's a company that they're not used to that, And that's kind of a broad question, but Jessica, you look like you had a thought there.
Yeah, I saw the question you're referring to in the chat, and it mentions college graduate, especially as a woman. Something I experienced, in finding my first job as well, and honestly, women are less likely to negotiate their salaries, based on studies. I think it's really honestly hyping yourself up to do it. Everyone should be negotiating, should be asking for more money. You just need to get yourself to a point where you're saying, okay, this is normal. I'm going to do it. Worst they can say is no. And I think in terms of how to ask, John, you can either do it via email, you can do it via phone, and Matt, you may feel different. I don't have a super huge preference whether it's through email or through phone. For me, it really depends on what you're comfortable with. If you are afraid you're going to go into the phone call and fumble over your words and start, panicking a little bit and you're not comfortable with that, do it via email. You have more control that way. You can really workshop your words, how you're going to do it. And then I think in terms of how you ask, it's, thank you so much. I'm so excited for the offer. I've loved meeting with the team. Always lead with that you are excited. And then, I've noticed via Glassdoor or via salary.com that the range is the range for this role in our area is a little bit closer to that. That's a little bit more in line with what I was expecting. is there any wiggle room? I typically like to ask that way. There's 100 different strategies, but leave it a little bit open. I'm looking to be closer to this range. What can we do rather than, I need to be at XYZ period. Really make it a conversation between you and them.
And yeah, to answer your question, I would say I think it depends who is making the offer. In some cases, you will have a recruiter reaching out saying, "Hey, we'd like to make you this offer." At that point, I think it's totally fine to just reply back, especially if it's in an email from them. If you get it and you have the moment and it's the hiring manager and it's the person that may or may not have the ability to make that decision, that's when it's always good not to say, "Hey, can we have a meeting to talk about salary expectations?" It's, "Hey, can we have a meeting to discuss the job offer in its entirety?" Because at that point, then you can ask for additional clarity relative to whatever benefits packages or other things. So then when you're kind of talking about all of those particulars, whether there's relocation or whatever other assistance support things, then when you slip that in, it's like, "Oh, and by the way," so you're not just directly saying, "Hey, I don't want it because I need more money." It's you're evaluating the entire total benefit package. And as a result, you're wondering if there's wiggle room there. Most people are going to be appreciative of you having the honest conversation. And at the end of the day, it may or may not be their decision, but it's mostly likely not their money, right? So looking at their budget, if it's reasonable and they can do it and it doesn't cause compression or inequity across the peer group, they'll probably go with it if you're the right person.
That's good to know. So there's a lot of questions coming in, and I think a lot of them have to do with salary, which is at the end of the day one of the biggest things, right? But I wanted to just ask a question to kind of broaden that negotiation where what are some other common benefits that an employer can offer? I think for younger people that might be PTO as well. And could you kind of explain where, how that works for some students, for interns versus full-time employees? What's different once you get your first full-time job? What would you say is like a good PTO or other benefits packages?
I mean, I'll jump at this one, Jess, just because I think at least one of my interns are on. My interns don't get any paid time off. They can take unpaid time off, but because temporary position, we don't provide any vacation time. I think in this day and age, if you get into a role that's providing you a salary, whatever that salary is, 2 weeks and some floating holidays is a very happy start. I've heard some companies locally starting people at 6 weeks vacation out of the gate, which to me, I'm jealous because my company's max is 5 weeks. And then we're capped. So I've been capped for a while. So it's an interesting balance, but I would say a couple weeks out of the gate is fine. From us as an organization, from an hourly perspective, you earn paid time off based on the average hours you worked. So as you start working, if you work 30 hours a week, you'll end up earning 30 hours a week in vacation because it's kind of in relation to what you've averaged to work in a week. And you'll start earning that on an annualized basis. But coming out of college, I'd say 1 to 2 weeks anyway, with some floating holidays, depending on how they account for those, and the flexibility to use it as needed.
Yeah, I think, a lot of times you talk PTO when you're talking about, negotiating things other than salary. Similarly here at BNN, we don't typically negotiate a lot for PTO. We give 4 weeks to everyone that starts, but it's standard across the company, and where we talk a lot about, internal equity and ensuring that people are paid the same and in the same bands and have the same opportunity to take time off. We keep a lot of that consistent, especially for college students coming in with intern experience and no full-time experience. Internal equity for salary is super important to us. One of the things that we see really on the rise is because we don't have as much flexibility in base salary or PTO, we see a lot more often sign-on bonuses being as part of the negotiations for us. So typically if a candidate comes in that we really like, or has interviewed really well and has all the experience we want as an entry level candidate, and they try to negotiate, that's typically where we try to find the middle ground with them or try to get them closer to where they want to be, is on that sign-on bonus. So definitely don't be afraid to ask for other unique forms of compensation if they can't get you there from the base salary.
So just the Q&A has been so great, and all and the panelists have been awesome. I want to bring everyone back for the last little bit here. Carol and Corian, Jessica and Matt, and bring in more of these questions. Keep them coming. So some people have been getting their questions answered in the Q&A, but I think Wyatt's question is a good one for the group. But who should we expect to actually be doing the negotiating with? Matt, you kind of talked about this, but in your experience, different companies are really structured differently. So who is sitting across the table?
I think a lot of times it's the recruiter that you're working with. I think in a smaller organization, you may be negotiating directly with the hiring manager, or as you work higher up, you may be negotiating directly with your hiring manager. But I'd encourage you, especially for the entry level jobs, utilize your recruiter as an advocate for you. My job is to get you the job and to fill this role for my company. So I'm always looking for the best solution for all parties. So I'm going to be an advocate for you. So you'll do the talking to me and I'll do the talking to the hiring manager and see where we can wind up.
So a lot of companies offer bands. Some interns may be familiar with that, but Carol, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about, what those are and, what is, some people kind of, what is reasonable? I think the answer is it really depends on the industry and where you are. But could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So there are bands or essentially like each role may fall within a certain level within an organization. So for example, like let's say at BNN, those within a staff role might have a certain salary band against them. Then the next level will have a different salary band. And essentially, when hiring managers are looking to hire, they'll stay within a certain range of compensation that they're willing to offer an individual. So when it comes to like, let's say, wondering whether you're at what point in time to ask about the salary band or negotiate the salary, I think it's definitely a great question to ask during the interview. Maybe not on the first round of interviews about salary, maybe towards the second round, asking around like, what is the salary range for this role? And they might be able to disclose some kind of a band for you. In term, like that would be one part of the conversation. It gives you an idea as to where should you fall within what you're going to ask in terms of your salary request, or like what, or from that perspective, and then you can negotiate from there. But it's always worth asking, like, can you share your salary range for this role? Some companies might give it to you, some might not. And that's where, what Jess was mentioning earlier in terms of do your outside research so you have some kind of a number in mind. And to that is figure out what is the number that you're going to go in with, as well as like, what's your walk away point as well. So it's good to have different numbers available and ready to negotiate with.
And kind of follow up the same kind of question, but this is for the group. Like, do you recommend them asking first, like providing the number first? Who blinks first? Like, should the business be offering the number first, or should the applicant be saying, here's what I'm willing to get paid?
Personal opinion is let them tell you what their range is. Let them tell you what the number is and stuff, because you might be coming in way low. And if you give that number, then that's really the benchmark in terms of how high you're going to go from there. So.
And I'll just add to that. So from a Hannaford perspective, there's a few states we operate in that by law, we have to post the pay range, whether it's hourly or salary for every role we post. So organizationally, we said we're just gonna be 100% transparent with our pay. So any job you see posted, it will tell you exactly what that range is. It won't say it's salary band 13 and give you some of those details, but it'll say, hey, your bottom is 80 and your top is 140, and you'll fall somewhere in between based on your experience, this, that, the other thing. And so as it started, there was like one state talking about it out of the 5 states we operate in. Now multiple have it in law or have it on place to become law. In 5 or 10 years, it might be commonplace that nobody can really post roles without showing in good faith what they're willing to pay you, at least in some type of a range.
Anyone would like to add to that? Getting a couple different questions around raises. So we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves even more. We have been an applicant, we got hired, and now we're working at that job, and our roles have changed, or we've been there for a little bit, or there's, you know, rising inflation. How do you go about asking for a raise? I guess I'll just loft this up to the group. I don't know who would wants to take this one.
I mean, when it comes down to it, you should have it backed up by performance. So if you're performing, you know, you're going above and beyond, those are the points that you should be using in terms of requesting a raise and stuff. Like, you need the evidence to back up your request. The other part too, I would say, is if you've been working there for a while, like you're able to also talk to your peers to see how much they're making and stuff. Like, legally, like, as long as you're not a manager talking or disclosing about, you know, other people's pay and stuff, as an employee, you have the right to ask others or like have those type of conversations about your pay. And if you're hearing that others are being paid more, you're in the same, like, let's say the same state, like doing the same role and stuff, that might be part of your conversation around like, hey, we're performing at the same level, we're, you know, working in the same state, where X, Y, and Z, like, I feel that my salary should be more comparable to my peers. And that's one way to negotiate that part of it too. So under union, like, even though you're not, like, even if your company isn't under a union, you're still covered by certain rights related to that stuff. So you can talk about pay with other colleagues on that end.
Anyone else like to talk about, you know, asking for raises?
I have a question for the rest of the panel. Is there, I always thought it was like salary.com. Is there a go-to resource where people can do their research?
So I do compensation for the firm, and there's, how do I put this? So there is information that employers receive through survey data that they purchase. But employees can essentially do something very similar by collecting the data from different sources. So for example, I would encourage you to go to Robert Half. They have a salary guide there that you can essentially type in a position, and it gives you ranges for that position. So that's one tool that you can use. You can also go on to the federal government's occupational data source and also look at based off of industries and based off of roles. It also gives you another data range. What I would suggest is grabbing those two sources or multiple sources and then doing a blended approach in terms of averaging out what that might be, so that you have a better, like, it's a little bit more, I guess, like, these are more specific in terms of a range that you would otherwise wouldn't be able to get just with one source. Like, one source may not be accurate enough, but when you're collecting different sources and combining that may give you a better indicator of what a range would actually look like for those roles. And I can probably put in the link a couple of those sources too, if that helps.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, just to follow up on that, everyone, we are recording this, and, you know, make sure you're checking your emails for the weekly newsletters. This will be on our YouTube channel, and we can also share any other resources that, you know, the panelists want to share. We know that this is, you know, by no means an hour is going to answer all of these questions around something so vital as these topics. But we really want to be a resource for you. We do have time for a few more questions here. Trying to kind of combine a few. So relocation bonuses, stipends, is that common to see? You know, I do see that sometimes when they're posted. is that something that the business often, I think, promotes, but how do you ask for that? And can you ask for more? Are those negotiable sometimes?
I can
Absolutely.
take,
I would. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
no, after you.
Absolutely. This kind of goes back a little bit what I was talking about in terms of sign-on bonus. Relocation bonus is very similar. If the organization is asking you to move cross country or move for the role, whether that be for a new offer or for a promotion or some sort of different assignment through your time there, absolutely, that's a point that you can negotiate. And if they don't offer it at all, do your research on what this move is going to cost you and come in with what those expenses look like, and then talk about relocation bonus. By showing your expenses up front, it really gives the backing for what you're asking for and why you're asking for it.
I was just going to comment with as far as relocation. For us as an organization, if you apply for a role out of our office or out of one of our stores and it's greater than 50 miles, we'll offer relocation to have you relocate within that bubble. If you choose to stay outside of that bubble, that's on you, but we will offer relocation, and that does vary based on career tier. So early new hires get much less than managers or officers. So there is kind of a sliding scale with it. So you might hear somebody getting 15 or 20 grand as a relocation package, and then you get an offer of 5 or 10 and you wonder why. It could be because that is your first time in and you're not owning a home that you have to now sell, and it's an easier transition.
Anyone else want to add about this one? So we have one question that just kind of came in here about turning or converting an internship into a full-time role. Fancy that. That's a topic of a whole other webinar later on in the summer that we're going to put on. That's going to be led by our very own Juliet. So I will save that one for another time. And we also have another hybrid workshop coming up about how to articulate your summer position on a resume. It's going to be a workshop. It's going to be both in person and virtual. So we do have a few other somewhat related webinars coming up. So I'll kind of save some of those questions. I think the last one we're going to have to go with is leveraging offers among different companies. And I see some smiles there, but how does one go about that? Is that wise? And how do you kind of start that conversation? Who wants to take that one?
I can start. Yes, I think it's very common. And when you're, coming out of school, it can honestly be a lot of the leverage that you do have. But I think the most important thing for you to remember is you need to be negotiating and using other offers that are comparable to the company or the job that you're going to be going in. You can't use a IT job to negotiate for a marketing job. It needs to be in the same market. It needs to be in the same range, because that's really what's going to give you the leverage. Like, hey, this company's paying this for this role. But if it's not for the role or not for a comparable role, it's not necessarily going to get you the result that you would be looking for, I would say.
Does anyone have any last minute?
Yeah, I would also say just be careful as well when you're utilizing other offers to negotiate and stuff. Like, are you willing to, again, it's like, what are you willing to risk and stuff? So like sometimes that might deter the employer that you're trying to seek the, the increase from or the accepted offer from and stuff. So like, are you comfortable with taking that other offer if the employer that you really want, that you're trying to negotiate with, isn't ready to budge, or they're not okay with that type of conversation? So it's just, it really depends on your risk levels there.
Well, thank you so much. I think that was a wealth of information. And thank you to all of our attendees who asked an amazing, awesome questions. Sorry if we weren't able to get to every single question, but please look out for this recording later and reach out if you have any more questions. Thank you to our panelists. You were all amazing.
Thanks for putting this on.
Yes. Take care, everyone. Have a nice rest of your day. Hope to see you at future events. And as always, thank you to Juliet for helping moderate this and be in the background there.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.